All right, I'm going to start the recording, and while everybody's working on the technical issues, we can go ahead and get started. My name is Jennifer Unitas, as most of you know, and with me today is Megan Rivera, and we are going to talk to you about bringing active learning to synchronous online instruction. You can see the little chat bubble there. We're just asking for everyone to write in the chat whether you're currently teaching a synchronous section and or if you're scheduled to teach a synchronous section in the spring. So if you could do that if you haven't already, we would appreciate it. And while you're doing that, as you'll see here shortly, we are going to go over some, setting of expectations and things like that. So our expectations for today are we do want this to be interactive. We do want you to ask questions, but if you do have questions, we just ask that you raise your hand, which is at the bottom middle of your screen, and we will call on you as soon as we can. We are covering a lot of content today, so if you could try to gear your questions, your specific questions around the content that we're discussing, and then we'll have time at the end to discuss anything else. And as always, as I'm sure all of you are tired of saying already, please make sure your mics are muted so that we don't get any, excess noise in the background. But once we call on you, you can unmute your mic. Mark, did you have a question?
Jen, before you jump right into your presentation, I did want to let everybody know that I am going in the chat to put a link. Again, if you were at our previous Lunch and Learn series, you've seen this link before. It is where you confirm your attendance. So you'll want to put in the date as well as the title so that we can ensure you get your credit for your PAS, okay?
Thank you, Angelina. All right, Megan, do you want to go ahead and get started?
Yes, sure. Okay, so as Jennifer explained, we're going to be covering bringing active learning to your synchronous online instruction. So as we know, as instructors, it's already a difficult task for us to keep learners actively engaged while we're covering content in a face-to-face setting. So now that we've moved instruction online, it's added a whole other layer of difficulty. You now have a screen between you and your students, and on their end, they have a whole other world around them that is trying to distract them. And so now you're in competition with all of those distractions, which just makes you need to up your game to try to keep them actively engaged. So we're going to hopefully provide you with a lot of material that you might be able to take some back to your synchronous classes, and it will help you with this new task that we face. So this just lists some things we're going to cover today. We're going to go over setting expectations in your synchronous classes. When you anticipate and prepare to address common issues up front, it will help you have clear sailing through the rest of your classes. So we're going to talk about that as well. Then we're going to go over engagement a lot and how you can try to shift your teaching when you are doing so in a synchronous setting to keep everybody actively engaged, and how you can build community. Because as we know, with our whole new norm that we're facing, students have less and less social interaction with people. So it's really important for you to not only engage your learners, but also help build a community in your online classes so that students don't feel so alone in their classes.
All right, so first and foremost, like I said, we want to set expectations. You want to make sure that you're clear on what you expect from them for their audio and video. We're all going to have technology issues. We can't really let that slow us down, but we want to address those issues as they occur. You also want to make sure that you are spending time, just like you normally do, going over your syllabus. You want to make sure that everything that you're stating is clear. What you want them to do, we want them on time. We want to make sure that their mics are muted, things like that. If let's say that my internet goes out, what am I going to do? You want to make sure that you explain to your students that they need to have a backup plan. use your phone, do this, do that, have everything laid out as best as you can. There's never going to be an answer to everything. We're never going to be able to foresee every issue that may occur, but to be as prepared as possible and let our students know what to do if certain things occur. The same goes for, if they're tardy or leave early. How do you handle that in your face-to-face class? You would handle that very similarly in your synchronous course. Engagement is big, and we are going to be talking a lot about that. We want to make sure that all of our students are as engaged as possible. We have students that are in our face-to-face classes that will sit there and, they're slouching and they're not paying attention, or they're playing on their phones, or they're talking to their friends sitting next to them. It's going to happen. It's just a matter of doing our best to keep them on track and being engaged. Luckily, Collaborate has a lot of tools that we can use to help with that engagement. We're always going to have people that are absent. What do you do in your normal class? Do you expect them to let you know in advance through email, something like that? You want to make sure that you're clear with those expectations as well, and you let your students know upfront and remind them regularly. This last one is where it varies a lot from our face-to-face instruction, and that's the Netiquette. If you don't know what Netiquette is, raise your hand. Do we have people? It looks like, okay. So Netiquette is really just making sure that we are kind and we are considerate to other people. So if you're in a face-to-face class, you can tell people, you don't talk to people that way, you don't treat people that way, and you're there as that buffer. Online, we need to make sure that we're very clear on our expectations there as well. You need to let them know we're not going to talk down to people, we're not going to degrade people, we're going to treat people with respect, we're going to be equals in a classroom environment. So, just like you go over your syllabus at the beginning of the semester, and most of you, I'm sure, are tired of telling your students by, midway through the semester, look at your syllabus. You should also start incorporating a Netiquette statement into your classroom somewhere so that all of your students know what your expectations are of them in the online world. With social media, we can see it. People hide behind their screens and they feel like they can say more than they normally would in front of somebody's face. So we have to be very explicit in our expectations for that. Do you have anything to add, Megan?
Well, let me just check with Cliff. Did you have a question, Cliff? Because he had his hand raised from the beginning of that slide.
Yeah, Megan, are these slides going to be available to us, or do I need to be taking notes?
We can send them to you for sure after our presentation's over.
Great, thanks.
You're welcome. So a few people in the chat said that they're currently teaching synchronous classes. So how many of you, by a show of hands, if you guys could just raise your hand, you can find at the bottom, have gone over any Netiquette expectations with your classes and have found it, you've done so? That's great. Because I know that a lot of people were kind of thrown into online sections, right? It might have not been scheduled originally, and so we had to pivot and make transitions and change the way you deliver your material. And so that's something that could have easily been overlooked, that we need to now add this extra sort of syllabus layer. It's an online, syllabus. So we want to make sure that we really emphasize the Netiquette expectations, like Jennifer was saying, to your class, because we want everybody to feel welcomed in the class, and we want everybody to feel like it's a safe environment where they can participate and communicate. Because if they don't feel like they have that safe environment, then anything that we try to use as tools for engagement, they're not really going to matter, because the students are going to shut down and they're not going to participate within the class. So I think that's all I wanted to add to that. Cliff, did you have something else?
I do. Made me think of something. Some of my students will just show their picture while I'm in class. And I'm thinking that to keep them engaged, it would be better to actually see them unless they do not have a camera or something. Any thoughts on that from the group as far as requiring them to show their actual selves online?
So I think that we get that question a lot in the Jules department or the collaborate consultants. A lot of instructors ask if the students are required to have their videos on. And I believe that is the expectation because we're trying to mirror face-to-face. So requiring students to have their video on so that you can see that they are, in fact, on the other side of the computer, and also have their audio available. However, we know that many, unforeseen things can happen. The student's video might not be working. They're having a poor connection. Then you might ask them to turn their video off because it helps strengthen their connection. With Collaborate, you do not see all of the students at one time. When they are in small groups, then you can see them, with 4 students on the screen. So some instructors might not require it when they're in the whole class setting, but when they break out, they might require it. So I think that that's probably handled in a lot of different ways. So if anybody else wants to share how they handle it in their class, that would be great. Dawn?
I just wanted to add that there also, just keep in mind, there may be some issues in terms of privacy wherever they are conducting their class. I know for the high school students, initially there were some concerns that they could not, Johnson County Schools said they could not require a student because of privacy issues, but that they reversed that decision, but those may be some reasons why a student decides to turn off their camera. But I think asking them questions, can assist with making sure they're engaged. And maybe some people would say, if I ask you a question, it's polite if you turn your camera on when giving an answer.
Yes, I definitely agree. And we're going to cover so many tools that you can use in place of the camera. So even if you can't see them, like Dawn said, there's going to be other ways that you can make sure that they're actively engaged, which I think is one of the greatest strengths about Collaborate. Dawn?
Yeah, my question was, and Ms. Stafford just sort of chimed in with something related. Do we know if Collaborate is going to try to, I can only see 2 faces at a time in Collaborate, whereas in, say, a Zoom session, I can get the whole matrix there. When it comes to video in the classroom and participation, it would really be helpful if I could see all of the people in a room at the same time. You know there's a solution coming for that?
So Collaborate did tell us that they are going to push out an update where you will be able to see all students, or at least toggle through, similar to like you can Zoom where you can change the view. They did not say when that was happening originally. I think it was supposed to be in 2020. Jennifer, have you heard any new updates about when that's coming out?
No, the last I heard was it was either going to be late 2020 or early 2021.
Okay. And you are supposed to be able to see 4 people. So if you want to email me after class, I can work with you to figure out why you're only seeing 2. I know it's not, the whole class, but at least 4, you are supposed to be able to see that, so we can figure out what issue's going on with that. Yeah?
My question might be more for Dawn. I'm not exactly sure, but I'm having students who are, and they've been told policy, but they're having lunch, they're having dinner, they're shopping in the mall, they're driving in a car. So I'm not exactly sure if you're going to cover that, of how to engage those students or what the policies are, but I'm getting that increasingly more. I think somebody was hunting today because the wind was so high. So I'm not exactly sure if anybody else is encountering that or what the policies are.
Well, I think that first and foremost, we need to address, driving in a car, that should just be not acceptable. And, that's a danger to them and others. anything where they're not able to fully engage. I mean, there's going to be times where, you know, people who have kids or, you know, something like that, that's going to take them away briefly. You know, things happen, but they need to act as if they are sitting in front of you, or you're sitting in front of them in a actual classroom space. That's how they should, you know, participate. Yes, Dawn.
I'll just chime in that there's not a policy that supports them, a requirement that they be in a particular place when they're doing their class. I think that, you know, we're all challenged. I'm checking emails on my phone while I'm on this session. I think we all kind of multitask. And I think that that's just one of the things that comes along with this delivery method, that they may not fully engage because they're doing a couple of things at a time. But again, I think some of the things that Megan and Jennifer will go over in terms of keeping them engaged, either through conversations or task or whatever, will, you know, probably assist that.
And so I know I handle each situation a little bit differently. It depends on what we're doing. So, you know, this poster is really helpful if you agree with these expectations, right? It says you need to be in a quiet space. So if we are doing something where they don't need to have their video on or their audio, as long as they respond to my prompts. So if I ask them to raise their hand or add something in the chat or share feedback or answer a poll, I don't really bother them about having their video or their audio on. But if we are going to work on a group assignment where they need to interact with their group members, then if they're not able to, you know, share their audio and do that, then they would have to excuse themselves and they wouldn't be able to participate in that class, just like if they were coming, you know, to a face-to-face class. So I think that that's probably a really gray area. As Dawn said, there's no policy, so it depends on how and what you're doing in your class. Amanda?
Yes, maybe this is more for Dawn too. I use a lot the polling questions to check if the students are around and participating. And I have a few students here and there that never answer my questions. And when I call for them, they just don't reply. What is the policy for that? Should we mark them as absent, even though their computers are logged in? How does that go?
You know, it's kind of like the student who comes to your class and sleeps through the entire thing, but they, you know, technically are present. I think unless you built in to your syllabus that, you know, a participation kind of requirement, like that you know, are required to answer questions within class that gives you participation points. It might be difficult now to say that the person was absent when you called roll and they said here. You know, it might be difficult to then say they were somehow absent unless they completely logged off and left your class. Much like if a student left class, you know, after 10 minutes, you would probably say that, you know, that they were theoretically absent. So I think those are conversations you have to have with a student and talk to them about the expectation that they fully participate in class. But some of these things we need to think through as you're building your syllabus for next semester. You know, this might be an area where you put in a participation points, so that they know that they can't just simply go in and log on and then, you know, leave and never answer your questions.
Yes, I think that's great now to do for the spring. Since, you know, you're starting fresh, if you know what you've experienced and what has given you trouble, then you can add that to your syllabus so that you're covered, and then you can explain those expectations. And if they don't, you know, adhere to them, then you'd be able to mark them absent without any problems.
Can I add in what I've found that worked for me? Because I use my reports also to see how long they've attended. So I noticed throughout my presentations, I ask questions, and then we have a review day where I ask questions throughout the whole time period and we talk about it. Anyway, those who aren't responding, I will often kick them out, because if they are there and they're just not responding, they'll sign back in. If they have logged in and walked away, then they're going to stay logged out. So I found it very helpful to just boot out the ones who aren't answering me back, and then I know if they're actively participating by the fact that they log right back in. And then that shows that they were there during the time period for the class. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a great idea, Tiffany. I
That is
hadn't thought of that.
great idea, Tiffany. Great idea.
Thanks.
I love it.
It's been very helpful for me to weed through the ones who are just my quiet ones versus the ones who really are just logging in and trying to pass. I actually had one girl who, that I noticed a pattern. That's what she was doing every single first week class meeting, basically. She was doing it every week, and I'm like, can't have it.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I hadn't thought of doing it that way. I will call on them and send them a private chat, and if they don't respond after a certain period of time, then I'll email them and let them know if they're not, actively engaged, they won't be counted here, but I'm going to try that next time.
Yeah, I do send an email during class too to let them know that I noticed they didn't log on, and that
Right.
the report would validate the fact that they weren't in class.
Cliff?
Yes, it was real staticky on my end. Could you kind of summarize what her technique that she just said? I couldn't get it all.
Yeah, sure. So if she has students that are not responding to her polling questions that she's doing or anything that she's asking them to do, then she'll remove them from the session, which you can do as a moderator. You can click next to the student's name in the attendees panel and you can remove them. And that way, if the student was paying attention, they'll rejoin the session. But if they had just walked away and kind of checked out, then they won't rejoin, and she'll be able to verify that when she pulls the attendance report afterwards. Okay. Jennifer, do you want to add anything before we move on?
Nope, I think I'm good.
Okay, so this next slide is going to be a quick one. I just want to make sure that everybody knows what to do in case of any technology issues, which we know are unavoidable. And apparently, since the whole world moved to virtual learning, I don't know about you, but the internet in my house has really crapped out, for the lack of a better word. It really does. It kicks me out at least 3 times a day. And so I'm constantly in live meetings and synchronous classes, so I always have to have a backup plan. So I have an Ethernet cable and I can hardwire in to my router, which gives me a stronger connection. If you are unable to do that, just moving yourself closer with your computer will strengthen your Wi-Fi connection in your house. So if your router is downstairs on the other side of the house and you're all the way on the opposite side, that will impede on your speed. So that's something you can try. If you're having any trouble with audio or video, I highly recommend a headset. I don't have one on right now. I normally do, but I figured I would spare you from me looking like a pilot, which is what I normally look like in all my sessions. It really helps give you a better audio and video quality. If you lose internet connection, I have Verizon on my cell phone and I pay to have a hotspot. So if my internet goes out, I quickly sign on to my phone's hotspot. And honestly, sometimes that's faster than my high-speed connection in my house. So that's my backup plan. My third contingency plan is I can join collaborate sessions from my phone. And so I explain those same techniques to my students. So that way, if they have any trouble, they know what to do in advance. And then I don't find myself spending, the first 10 minutes of class helping students with internet issues or what they could do to help. They already know because I've covered it all. Yes, Frank, you could definitely purchase a repeater, which I have a few in my house as well, which can speed up your signal also. So I just wanted to cover those in case maybe one of them hadn't crossed your mind and it helped somebody. Jennifer, any others that I forgot?
Yeah, actually, so for all of us, if you have VPN on your laptop and you notice that you're losing connectivity a lot, if you don't need to have the VPN up and running, I found that it's a lot better to turn it off, because then I have less issues with my internet access. I don't know what it is with the VPN, but sometimes it just causes conflicts. So just another tidbit for you guys.
That's a good idea. Oh, I just thought of one more thing. I did mention this earlier, but if your students are having any trouble, then I do extend the courtesy to tell them, go ahead and turn off your video, because if they are, if their speed is low on the upload side when they're trying to speak to you, if they turn off their video, then that'll help with that issue as well. Does anybody have any questions about that? Okay, great.
All right, so this is probably Megan's favorite slide. Megan is our Bitmoji queen. As you can see, there is a Bitmoji for that. There's a Bitmoji for just about everything. The purpose of Bitmojis, at least for our purpose, is it helps students. It catches their attention. It keeps them engaged. It really kind of brings everybody together, because we are sitting behind screens and we may not always have our video on. So if you use Bitmojis, you can kind of help people see you for your personality. It really does help. You can see, raise your hand for me if you know whose Bitmoji this is, over here in the bottom right. Elizabeth?
That's Lance.
Yes, it is. So Lance told us the other day that the students love it. It keeps them engaged and they're excited about coming to class. Yes, Dawn?
Nothing. I was just taking a guess, but Elizabeth beat me.
Oh.
I don't think he's that gray, but.
No, he's probably not, but you know, that's what he chose, so we're running with it. So I'm gonna share in the chat a link for an article. I'm going to use this also as an example of a time where, instead of going over an article or bringing it up on your screen, you can share an article during your class time. And you can tell the students, I want you to go and I want you to read this. And I want you back in, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, however long the article will take to get through. And when you come back, we're going to discuss it. So that way, you're not just sitting there talking. It's not, just the talking head the entire time. And it gives them something to do while you're still in the class. And it would just be like if you were handing out, a piece of paper during class, where they would read it and then you would have a discussion. So I did want to point that out while we're here and talking about it. So you can see in the bottom left side, our friend at ECA, Miss Dawn Blankenship, she is using Bitmojis. She actually credits Megan, like many of us do, for pushing the Bitmojis in our classes. She, talks about, she did a Lightboard video only discussing Bitmojis, and she talks about how it really helps people and how some people don't feel comfortable showing their own picture of themselves, for whatever reason. Myself, I am the least photogenic person ever. My daughter, my oldest daughter, every picture that she posts of me, I look like I'm sneezing or yelling. It's just, that's who I am. I accept that. But that's why, Bitmojis are good for me, because then I can share kind of who I am with people. So, and I know Megan has a lot more to discuss on this topic, so I'll let her take over.
So I can only take credit for coming up with emojis, but I was tasked with coming up with something very unique like this by Dawn. I think it was last year. And I was like, oh my goodness, what am I going to come up with? Dawn, I don't know if you remember that. You asked for a guide on the side, and this is what I had. So Dawn pulled it out of me, and so then we have been using Bitmojis ever since. And I definitely get lots and lots of positive feedback. I haven't heard one piece of negative feedback from any students about Bitmojis. They see them, they've probably seen them for more than half their lives. They probably talk with Bitmojis and emojis more than they talk with words when they're texting. So when they sign into Blackboard and they see an announcement that has, you know, their instructor with some cool shades on over here, it just makes them want to read the announcement more instead of it just being only text. And I think instructors might have mixed feelings about that. So I'm going to send out a poll to see what everybody thinks about the Bitmoji madness.
And while you are all answering, I wanted to point out, for those of you who are teaching synchronous courses, you probably have already seen this if you've used the polls. If you are going to be teaching a synchronous course, or you're still, you know, not really sure, I wanted to just tell everybody, when we put out a poll for people, if you go to the attendees panel, you can see everyone who has responded. The nice thing about that is you can also use that, because at the end of every session, any poll that you give, you can actually download an Excel file with all of the responses from the polls. So you can use that as well for, you know, grading purposes. You know, if you want to give 2 points for participation that day, you can do that through the polls. So we have a couple more people who were waiting.
So if when I'm teaching my class, let's say if Jennifer didn't respond, I would say, hey, Jennifer, are you still with us? Can you go ahead and answer the poll? To give them a quick reminder, because, you know, maybe they are checking their email, or maybe they, you know, somebody in their house asked them for something. There is another feature that, if you're not aware of it already, it's really helpful, because if your students don't want you to call out their name because they're not answering because they just went to use the restroom, which is totally acceptable, there's an away feature. So if you look at the bottom of your screen, you have a little silhouette, or if you were fancy, which I love, you added a profile picture already. And if you click on that, it pops open a little white window, and there's an away button. And if you click the away button, it adds a little yellow clock next to your name. And it just lets everybody know that you've stepped away. And then when you return, you just click on back. So I just think it's great for you to inform students that's a possibility, because if they do need to step away, they don't want to feel like they're going to miss something and you think they're not paying attention, they can use that feature. Just like they would, you know, get up out of your class and go out in the hallway to either take a phone call or go use the restroom. So that sort of mirrors them walking out of your class. So, and for the poll, as Jennifer said, it's at the bottom. And if you still have a few people who haven't responded, but you want to end the poll, you can turn it off, and then nobody else will be able to respond to that poll again. And in order to start a new poll, you do need to end the first poll. Okay? Does anybody have any questions about polling? Nikki, how do you see your own answer went through? You should see on the question, on the poll itself, it would be highlighted. Like I chose number 1, of course, my number 1 is solid black. Did you have something else, Nikki?
No, I do see it is solid black. I just wanted to, I didn't know if that meant that it had gone through to you guys.
Perfect, yep. Okay, and then if I want to show everybody the responses, I can. And all you'll see is how many people answered with each response. It will only show the moderators who said which answer. It won't show the moderators how everybody answered. Okay, so the majority loves it, which is great. A few people, it's not their thing, and some have mixed feelings on it. So I'll go ahead and end that poll. And I knew that some people already had mixed feelings on it. I know it's not some people's thing. I know some people think that it's not, you know, really for college students and adults, but I really want to challenge you to make yourself a little bit uncomfortable, and I promise you that adults and college students love to have fun. And if you make it look fun and enjoyable and engaging, they are going to feed off of that. And I promise you will get great feedback from it. On?
I want to echo that and just say that it doesn't necessarily have to be a Bitmoji. You can, and I got this feedback even in sending emails and things out to my department. You can use pictures to help convey the message, because when you see, just think of all of us when we get an email and it is blocks and blocks and blocks of text. That I know sometimes I'm like, oh my God, I'm not even reading through all that stuff. But sometimes if you see a picture, that it kind of helps you understand quickly the messaging for some of the text, and you may read that. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a Bitmoji. I think we're just saying that it's good to break up some of the text to get students interested in what you're writing, and increase the likelihood that they are actually going to read it. I think it's the same thing with like the PowerPoints, where students would complain it's just like a whole block of text, and most PowerPoint experts would say you probably should have a picture that captures what you're trying to say, and then a little bit of text to support it. So that's the whole reason that I think we're trying to push using some imagery to help convey your message.
Absolutely. And we have a couple of examples that we're going to get to here in the next few slides that show you, how powerful an image can be or how powerful a video could be. And it's exactly what Dawn said. We get hundreds of emails every day. And I don't know if everybody wants to admit it, but when it is text heavy, you're like, oh my goodness, another long email to read. But just one little, picture really helps bring it to life, and you're like, oh, let me see what this is about. So it totally changes your perspective on it when you see something. Cliff?
Yeah, could you remind me where the polling button is at, to poll?
So I turned it off already. Right now, so you cannot create a poll since you're not a moderator today. But when you're in your sessions, then you can create polls. We'll send out another one in a little bit, and then we'll make sure that you are able to locate it. Okay?
Thanks.
You're welcome. Okay, so on to engagement. So, we are practicing what we preach as we go through. We have done, several different engagement methods with all of you since we started today's presentation. And so we're just going to review some of these and talk about them, the ones that we haven't done yet. So the raising hand feature is really great for your students to be able to ask questions. I also use it to just make sure that everybody is with me. So I'll say, or I'll ask them that instead of doing a poll, how many of you have used a Bitmoji before, by a show of hands, and then I'll ask everybody to raise their hand. So that's one way you could use it. The request feedback button, I've seen a few of you using this. Amanda Z, I've seen you use this a couple times, which is great. So in case you're not aware of it, at the bottom of your screen, the same little circular button that you were able to find the away feature, underneath the away button, you see all different kinds of feedback that your students can share. So sometimes I'll ask them that. I'll say, okay, if you guys are with me and you're understanding, what we're covering, please let me know and share the happy feedback. Or if you're confused and you want me to review it, then click the confused button. And then that way it's a check-in. Everybody can go ahead and share their feedback. If somebody doesn't, you can ask them, like, hey, Jennifer, can you please share your feedback? The feedback automatically goes away after 30 seconds. So it's just a really quick way to make sure that your students are still there and they haven't gotten up and walked away from the computer. And it's really great to have these silent check-ins, especially for your more shy students who don't want to share their audio, and ask a question out loud or have to answer a question. So we've obviously gone over the polling, and we'll do that again in a bit. Everyone has found the chat feature, okay? Sometimes I don't make them write something if I want to do a check-in. I'll just ask them to share an emoji. So I'll say, share an emoji with how you're feeling today. So why doesn't everybody try to do that? In the chat area, next to where you could type something, you click on the downward arrow next to the emoji and go ahead and share an emoji with how you are feeling today. And please forgive me, I had to turn off my video because I was having a poor connection. And as soon as I turned off my video, my connection got better. So moving on to the next one, emojis, I just covered that. That's within the chat. You can use those. Breaks. So I don't necessarily mean, I kind of put this along with chunk the session. I don't necessarily mean to just give them a break, although that would be good too, since you know that they're probably doing other things while they're in your class. If you just tell them like, okay, it's 12:42, everybody just take a 5-minute mental break and we'll meet back here at 12:47. Make sure you remind them not to leave the session because that would waste too much time to have everybody disconnecting and reconnecting to the session. So they could stay in it, they turn off their audio and video, and tell them to come back in 5 minutes. And then you kind of just let them refresh and restart, and everybody starts off on a clean slate. The breakout groups are great to use. Please raise your hand if you have used the breakout groups in your classes, and leave your hands up for a minute so that we could see everybody's responses. Great. So I use the breakout groups every single class that I have. And I just think that when I put the students into the breakout groups, it's less intimidating for them to be able to share their audio and speak to the other students because there's less of them. I'm also able to jump from group to group, and then I can see, all 4 of my students at one time, which helps build community between me and the students and their classmates as well. So I would highly encourage using breakout sessions to build community and encourage engagement. Carla, no, I don't have any issues with students getting disconnected when I go into breakout groups. Have you had issues with that? I haven't experienced that, and I do use it every class time. You guys can put your hands down unless you still have a question. Carla, send me an email about that so we could try to figure out what's going on because I haven't heard that before. Chunking the session. Jennifer gave a great example of this before, and I love this method. So instead of talking the whole time and then maybe playing a video by sharing your screen, if you have, like a 2 or 3 minute video you want to share for YouTube, instead of doing that, just give them the link for the YouTube video and then tell them, okay, go ahead and click on the link, watch the video, and be ready to discuss it back here in the session, in 7 minutes, and just give them a time. And I think that they like that too because it just breaks it all up. I remember, Dawn, in one of your USET meetings, you reiterated to everybody what's happening to the attention span of people, right? Every year it's going down and down. So if you just talk the whole time, the students, you're going to lose them. So break it up and do different things. Do breakout groups for a little bit, talk for a little while, send them off to do something, and then bring it all back. And I think that you will see your increase doing that. Susan, do you have a question? Or was your hand up before?
My hand was up before. Do you have a question though, since you asked?
Sure.
So we can never show a video, right? So there's a problem with them hearing it. Is that correct? Because I've had trouble with that.
So when you share your screen, there is a little button. It's a little checkbox that you have to click in order to share your computer audio. So Collaborate is only picking up your microphone audio because you're talking, obviously. So when you share your screen, you have to click the little checkbox to share computer audio in order for the students to hear the video you're sharing.
Thank you. Because
You're welcome.
sometimes I do like to have a group conversation because we can stop and start the video to discuss parts of it. But yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Cliff, did you have a question? Or was your hand up?
Yes. Am I supposed to be able to see the breakout group button now? Is that hidden also, or?
No, sir. You guys don't have the power right now. You're just all in here as students. I apologize. So when you're in here
Okay. Thank you.
as a moderator, then you'll see all of those features become available again. And so the last one on this list is wait time. And I just talked to Jennifer about this the other day, right? Wait time is really important. And I hadn't noticed, but in my face-to-face class, it's much easier for me to give wait time. And wait time is crucial for engagement. Because if you don't allow enough wait time, you're not giving all of the students an opportunity to participate. The same students are usually going to volunteer and participate right away all the time. So I have noticed that in an online setting, for some reason, time seems to move faster for me, and I haven't been giving enough wait time. So I challenge you guys to, when you ask a question, give wait time. And if it becomes that uncomfortable silence, then it means that you're doing it right. And you're allowing for students to actually process what you're saying and come up with what they might want to share. And then you should see your active engagement increase, and it won't be the same students all the time. Jennifer, anything to add to that?
As far as wait times go, I know how hard it is because you're sitting there and you're staring and you're feeling vulnerable while you're not saying anything. And 5 seconds feels like 5 hours. But after Megan and I discussed that, I was like, yeah, I don't give enough time. So, start just kind of counting in your head, while you're waiting for people, like the 5, 7 seconds, something like that, which will feel like an eternity.
It will, it really does.
Alrighty, so now we're going to talk about leveling up our engagement, and I know we only have about 12 minutes left, so we're going to try and kind of breeze through these really fast. One of the things is videos versus slides. So, we sit here, and Megan and I are doing it right now, but, we do have other ways to engage you during this. But in our classes, we're showing the slides through Collaborate, and we're mirroring exactly what we're doing in the classroom. But consider creating a video out of your slides and either adding music to the background or changing some of your images, or even talking over a little bit and then adding music in between or something like that. Because then you can send the students off to watch it and you can chunk things into smaller sections for them, and then you can come back and have an active discussion about that. Plain text versus Bitmojis. So we talked about this a little bit as far as breaking things up with pictures, Bitmojis, emojis, an image that has to do with whatever it is that you're discussing in your text. When we talk about screencasts versus Word docs, screencasts would be, discussing. So I know a lot of you already do this, and you record yourself discussing what you would normally have in an announcement. That's really important because it breaks up the monotony, especially if you have something that's a little more difficult to explain in words. Not all of us are amazing as our wonderful English department with, these beautiful words all written nicely and things like that. So using a screencast, just recording yourself talking or recording yourself walking through steps is really helpful for students, especially students these days with the way that they learn and, retain information. We're not saying only do videos or only do text, but if you change it up a little bit, it helps to keep students engaged. And we've talked about this one too a bit, layering our content versus just static content. Really building on a lesson. So you start with your normal lesson where you would normally discuss things, and then you add in a video where they all go out and they, watch the video, or they all go out and they read whatever article it is you want to share, and then you bring them back and you show them something else that's related. So really start layering your content. Another one is like considering using, and this doesn't work for everyone, but for those of you who it will work for, doing something like a scavenger hunt or something fun to break it up versus having them write an essay, or offering the option for students to do a presentation instead of an essay when possible, because we really want to start considering, universal design and how different students learn and what their comfort levels are. We really want to try whenever we can to empower our students to break the mold and think outside the box, and changing some of these things for our students is certainly going to help them in the long run. Of course, they're always going to have to write essays in a lot of classes, but whenever you can find that out of the box type of assignment or assessment for them, definitely consider doing that. The next one is Spark versus PowerPoint, but this would go really any type of presentation tool you can think of. There's Prezi, there's Spark, there's Microsoft Sway, PowerPoint, Canva. There's a bunch of different types of presentation applications out there. It's really easy to open up PowerPoint because it's right there, it's on our computers, and we use it all the time. But if you think from a student's perspective, they're looking at the exact same type of content from us day after day after day, after week after month. And 3 months of just viewing PowerPoints with our students, it gets a little stale sometimes. So consider using something that looks a little different that will still serve the same purpose. So if you use Adobe Spark, it just changes the way, it changes the feel of the presentation for our students. So it brings that engagement in again for them. And we have tons of ideas for all of these, by the way. So if you have any questions, you can email us. And then, things like Flipgrid versus YouTube. We send our students out to watch YouTube videos all the time. We embed them in Blackboard. Everything that we do, we upload to YouTube and we let our students watch them. But instead of doing that, consider using something like Flipgrid or another type of application just to change it up a little bit for our students, so that they're not getting bored, so that they're not watching the same type of content every day, day after day. Anything you want to add, Megan? You're muted.
Thanks.
Oh, me?
So I think just mixing everything up and using a variety of methods all the time instead of just sticking with the same one. You're also reaching all the different learning styles that way, which is important for us to consider with our diverse, classroom full of students. We need to try to reach them, in as many ways as we can. Dawn?
I just wanted to echo what you're saying, but for someone as an administrator who reads student comments every semester from every class in my department, death by PowerPoint is a very real feeling for students. And so I think, changing it up even, even just maybe you have to do PowerPoint, but adding more visuals, adding music, throwing in a lot more animation, because that is definitely a theme semester after semester with students saying, like, my gosh, this is way too much. It's every single class, every single lesson is a PowerPoint. So I do think we have to do our part to add some variety.
Yes, absolutely. And we're going to show an example of that here in a minute. But Megan, do you have anything else to add before we proceed?
Nope, not on this one. I think that's
Okay.
it. So this is just an example, and again, it doesn't have to be a Bitmoji. It could be an image. Sometimes I don't put in a Bitmoji. Sometimes I'll just put a clip art image of a 14, which alerts them that it's week 14. But here's, plain text announcement that students will see. They wouldn't see the background. That's just our, PowerPoint. This is from another instructor who I saw, and it was really powerful. I felt like the image she added. So let's look at the next one. So she put this Bitmoji in there, and I just loved it. And I was so excited to read it because it says, "Let's go," and she looks really excited about it. And so I just wanted to show the difference between just having text, and adding something that literally takes 2 minutes to put in. And again, it doesn't have to be a Bitmoji. It could be, an image or a quick video. If you have an iPhone, an updated iPhone, you can take lots of videos with your Memojis. And I do that as well. And I put those into my announcements too, because it's super fast to record yourself. Or you could record the animated version of yourself and you just upload it right to your YouTube channel and embed it in announcements. So that's a really quick way to reach the students with a video of you, and it helps build community as well in an online classroom when they get to see you and hear you and know that you're a real person, or an animated person in my case. So the next one here, do you have the links you want to send for those, or do you want to share the screen?
Yeah, I'll go ahead. If you click on the top one, and I'll get the link ready for the bottom one.
Okay, so Jennifer has a really awesome example of how a Google slide just leveled up by the instructor making it into a Spark. And we're going to show that to you here. I'm going to just share my screen because I can't get it in here. So here, can you see the presentation? Somebody share their audio and let me know if you guys can see it. Okay, so this is just this static presentation, that an instructor created. Oops, sorry. Okay, there you go. And then we're going to see how it really leveled up, and you guys could tell us what you think about what they did with it.
So I'm going to share the YouTube link for this. If you'll just watch like the first 30 seconds on your own, make sure your mic is muted so we don't get any feedback issues or anything like that. Just watch 30 seconds of it and then come back since we only have about 2 minutes left. So everybody should be coming back now. Megan posted a poll, so if you could go ahead and respond. Were you impressed with the difference between the static presentation and the video version of the presentation?
Sorry, there's a little typo in my abbreviation there.
That's all right. So my thought on this while you're answering is that that leveled that presentation up. That's something that the students would have read on their own, and they would have had to digest that information. Now, the images are exactly the same in both presentations. Everything is the same with the exception of the music, and it's now automated. Every slide transitioned perfectly. Yes, we do have access to Spark for free. It's spark.adobe.com. And you just sign up with your JCC email. But it's a game changer, and little tiny things like that make all the difference. We did this in our Bright certification course. This was one of the assignments they had to do, was they had to take an existing presentation and level it up. And that, I feel like, is a perfect example of leveling up your presentation for your students, for really creating that engagement. Is everyone, raise your hand if you're okay staying for another 2 minutes. If you need to leave, we understand. Okay, good. We have a majority of people that are good. So Megan, do you want to go ahead and we'll get started so we don't have to hold people here too long? Are we showing responses too?
Yep, let me show the responses real quick. So mostly everybody said yes. A few people hadn't responded yet. And 2 people are hard to impress. So showing the responses for your polling, I think, is really important when you're using the polling to show your students, that you're actually looking at it. So it kind of gives it more accountability, and it helps, that engagement again. So make sure that you try to get them looking at the results as well. So this last.
How did you show your poll? I'm sorry, I missed that part.
Sure.
How did you show the poll?
So when you send the poll out, at the bottom of it, it gives you an option that says show responses, and you just click on that. And if you don't find that, Thea, if you just send me an email, I'll make you a video, a screencast video, and I'll show it to you. So the last slide that we have here is build community. So we talked all about engaging and building community hand in hand, because as you are building community, you are also engaging your learners. And like I mentioned, with everybody being online more and more and more, and being at home, a lot of students feel really alone, and we have to try to up our game as to making them feel included and being a part of the class. Some people, participate on their own, they're outgoing, they like to be social, and so it comes naturally to them. But if we can put other strategies in place that help the more shy students, participate and become more social within the class, that would really be great for the students, and that's what we're all about. So here are some ways that you can build community. I already talked about breakout groups. Accountability partners are really great. A few of you are actually taking the ACUE micro professional development course with me as well, and they talked about a few of these in that class. Accountability partners, so for synchronous courses, you can give a student a partner, and then they sort of need to make sure that, hey, they weren't in class today. And so their role would be to email the student and say, hey, I saw you weren't in class today, I hope everything is okay. Let me know if you need to know what you missed. So you can kind of give it the roles that you want to and decide how involved you want it to be, but just having somebody looking out to make sure that you were in class, and if you weren't there, that you were actually missed and somebody noticed, would really take it, to the next level. And I know that we had mental health awareness, so we know that this pandemic has really, mental health has taken a hit in a lot of cases. So if you could also feel like this is for the greater good of your students as well, that will help you incorporate it even more. If you have a student who is more shy, but you could see that they like to participate, they just don't like to volunteer, you could be the class, they could be the class leader. I don't do class leaders, I do group leaders. So I use breakout groups every class, I told you. So I have them take notes, or they're researching something and sharing it on the whiteboard in the breakout groups. And the group leader is responsible for taking a screenshot of what they did. And then when we come back into the main room, that group leader becomes a presenter, and they're able to share their file so that we can all look at it. So it just gives different students opportunity to participate in different ways. Even if they're not presenting information, they feel like they're a part of the class because they had to take the screenshot and they had to share the file. So something that small really could go a long way. I think, was it Dawn, Jennifer, who came up with the final phrase for this one, the chat champion?
Yes, it was.
So if you have a student each week, be in charge of the chat. If you're sharing the screen, they could just let you know that somebody has a question, or when I shared my screen, I asked, if somebody can let me know once you can see it. It kind of gives them, a little job to do. And I really like to use entry tickets and exit tickets. So we had an entry ticket, so to speak, when we started. It gives the students leeway to getting into the class. You can also be getting your attendance pulled up, and then students are actively participating already. We asked all of you when you arrive to please share in the chat if you're currently teaching Synchronous or if you're going to in the spring. Okay, so it kind of gives a little leeway, but you're starting on time and they're already working on an assignment. Sometimes I make it not related to class, and I might just ask them, you know, if they did something fun over the weekend, if they want to share it. An exit ticket could be related to the class again or something funny. One class I used an exit ticket, which students loved, was if you could be a part of any fictional family, what would it be? And they all got to share that, and then they got to see each other's interests, and that kind of sparked conversation when we talked about it in the beginning of the next class. So there's so many different ways to build community and build engagement. And me and Jennifer could talk about this all day long, but we can't because we're out of time. So if anybody else ever wants any ideas or wants to, you know, tell us what you teach and see if we can offer you some ideas, please don't hesitate to email us because I think it's super fun to do that and I'd be happy to help.
Well, thank you all so much. I know you saw that Angelina had posted for you to go into the Google Doc for attendance purposes today, so make sure that you did that. And we'll make sure that Angelina has a copy of this presentation, and inside of that is also the links and the image for what we normally show at the beginning of class, you know, our expectations. So thank you all for attending today.
Thank you all very much. I hope everybody has a great day.
Thank you.
You're welcome.